It's you. Only you that emerged.
A man is born and becomes a physicist. He falls in love with a colleague. Everything appears to be going swimmingly. That is until one fateful day when he is involved in an accident at his research facility. He is presumed dead. There is nothing to bury. No one hears from him again. That is until he miraculously reappears with these godlike abilities. He attempts to continue his life with his lover, but becomes increasingly detached not only from her, but from humanity as a whole. Eventually, his relationship disintegrates. He cheats on her with a younger woman and establishes a new love affair with her. Later on, though, that relationship also deteriorates amid rising tensions during the Cold War. There is a hope that he, now referred to as Dr. Manhattan, can prevent this nuclear holocaust from occurring. But the question becomes, is Dr. Manhattan willing to defend life? Does he care enough anymore to do so? After breaking up, his girlfriend leaving him, he decides to leave Earth and go to Mars. He spends some time alone there, but eventually invites his lover, Laurie, to join him for a conversation in which she is going to attempt to convince him to return to Earth and help them prevent this nuclear war. So Laurie attempts to persuade him that life is worth defending and fighting for. Dr. Manhattan disagrees, believes life to be a highly overrated phenomenon, and challenges Laurie to explain how this world, his new world on Mars, would be improved by something like an oil pipeline. Becoming increasingly frustrated, she demands that Dr. Manhattan just send her back to Earth alone to die with all the other worthless human beings. But before he does that, he reveals something to Laurie about her own history and life she was not privy to, something earth-shattering. That someone that assaulted her mother is actually her biological father. This is highly upsetting for Laurie to learn, believing her life is just a big joke. Dr. Manhattan disagrees. He finds it miraculous, kind of miracle, that her mother could, with someone she has every reason to hate, produce something as beautiful as her. Out of all that conflict and chaos, this perfect being emerged. And to him, that's a kind of miracle. And with that, Dr. Manhattan changes his mind about the fate of Earth and his involvement. He decides to return to defend or help prevent this nuclear threat. Now, once the issues on Earth are resolved, Dr. Manhattan again decides to leave Earth and Laurie. He says to her, "You taught me the value of life. I think I'll create some." This story is aged very well, and it raises a theme discussed elsewhere by an author you're perhaps sick of me referencing, called Nassim Taleb. We're going to talk about his more recent book, Skin in the Game, today, and how this overlaps with Dr. Manhattan's arc, and how both the book and Dr. Manhattan may relate to you and your predicament. This idea of skin in the game is woven into history. Historically, all warlords and warmongers were warriors themselves, and with a few curious exceptions, societies were run by risk takers, not risk transferers. Prominent people took risks, considerably more risks than ordinary citizens. The Roman Emperor Julian the Apostate, about whom much later, died on the battlefield fighting in the never-ending war on the Persian frontier, while emperor. One may only speculate about Julius Caesar, Alexander, and Napoleon, owing to the usual legend building by historians. But here the proof is stark. There is no better historical evidence of an emperor taking a frontline position in battle than a Persian spear lodged in his chest. Julian omitted to wear protective armor. One of his predecessors, Valerian, was captured on the same frontier and was said to have been used as a human footstool by the Persian Shapur when mounting his horse. And the last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, Paleologus, was last seen when he removed his purple toga, then joined Ioannis Dalmatus and his cousin Theophilus Paleologus to charge Turkish troops with their swords above their heads, proudly facing certain death. Yet legend has it that Constantine had been offered a deal in the event of a surrender. Such deals are not for self-respecting kings. These are not isolated anecdotes. The statistical reasoner in this author is quite convinced less than a third of Roman emperors died in their beds. And one can argue that given that few of these died of really old age, had they lived longer, they would have fallen either to a coup or in battle. Even today, monarchs derive their legitimacy from a social contract that requires physical risk-taking. The British royal family made sure that one of its scions, Prince Andrew, took more risks than commoners during the Falkland War of 1982, his helicopter being in the front line. Why? Because noblesse oblige. The very status of a lord has been traditionally derived from protecting others, trading personal risk for prominence. And they happen to still remember that contract. You can't be a lord if you aren't a lord. Taleb then shares a principle that applies to the modern era. Bureaucracy is a construction by which a person is conveniently separated from the consequences of his or her actions. So this is what we increasingly see today in the modern world, that an increasing number of people are able to make decisions, the consequences of which they're insulated from. So if they make really stupid decisions, harmful decisions, they are insulated from that harm, unlike other people, which their decisions affect. So there's this disconnect that's occurred that has removed the skin in the game, which historically has incentivized people to think more carefully about the decisions they're going to make, because if they make the wrong decision, it's going to directly affect them. Now, how does this relate to the Dr. Manhattan vignette? Well, there's another quandary or issue when it comes to skin in the game, a different type that perhaps is more relevant here. The one Taleb describes is certainly relevant, but what about people that lack skin in the game but also lack power? That would appear to be more relevant to the common man existing today. And why an increasing number, perhaps arguably, of men are just dropping out, exiting, going on strike, however you want to define it. It's been talked about for over a decade. One way of looking at it, or one way to understand this phenomenon, is that it is both a lack of skin in the game and a lack of power. With Dr. Manhattan, he has power, but he doesn't have anything he believes is worth fighting for. So he could exercise an influence, but he doesn't care to. Now, I think what a lot of men are experiencing today is that they both don't believe they have the power to have an impact, and also they have nothing to defend. So it's the worst of both worlds in a way. Now, it's one thing to believe you have the capacity to exert an influence, but care not to. It's another to feel like even if you wanted to, you can't. How do we get around this? I don't claim to know, but Dr. Manhattan, perhaps his story is suggestive, at least in one way, that for him, he had to be first convinced that life was valuable. I've referenced this antinatalist phenomenon before, this hostility to wanting to be parents, to wanting to raise kids, make families. But if people simply don't believe it's worthwhile to reproduce, create life, shape life, then they don't really have skin in the game beyond their own hedonistic ambitions that are limited to their lifespan and ends with them. So Dr. Manhattan, to go back to him again, he was convinced through this reframing of life as a kind of miracle that it was worth defending on Earth, and once he defended it on Earth, he was now ready to create some for himself, expand, broaden life. Interestingly, if you read the graphic novel version of Watchmen, at the end of this chapter, where Dr. Manhattan and Laurie have their discussion that concludes with them returning to Earth, the author, Alan Moore, includes a quotation from none other than the late C.G. Jung. What does he say? It's from Memories, Dreams, Reflections. Jung writes, "As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light of meaning in the darkness of mere being." So how do we get meaning? Arguably, skin in the game is a prerequisite. If you don't feel your actions can have an impact, why care? What is there to defend if that is the case? But that's the challenge, it would appear. To figure out if there is something here that you believe is worth fighting for. Because if there isn't, then it's solitude and/or hedonism. And I've discussed the pitfalls with those elsewhere. So I certainly wish we weren't in this state that Taleb describes, where we've just created this infrastructure. Well, I say we inherited it, in which people gain power and are insulated from their stupid, insane decisions. But that is the situation we find ourselves in. And the question is, do you want to resign yourself to doomerism, or take maybe Candide's approach of attempting to tend or nurture your own garden in some fashion, however you do that? I don't know how to do that for you. It's very hard to give someone meaning. People come to me in therapy all the time looking for it. I have to disappoint them, because without an appeal to a centralized doctrine, which you're free to adopt, I can't objectively give you an answer. All right, time's up. You can think about it. Till next time.